Wasn't it crazy how we actually got to go to the movies yesterday?
Explain how it was crazy.
to you normal people out there. No. It's baby stuff, right? There are other normal people out there who also have babies. I'm not saying that having a baby makes you abnormal, but it makes everything difficult. You have to plan around any sort of activity, and it's like we were talking to a nurse. It's like it's a pediatric whatever, and she said that like just having a baby makes you very local. You're kind of like locked into your immediate surroundings around your house, which is like why you want to find baby groups and stuff who are living close to you, because everything's a project.
Yeah.
But now we actually managed to she's old enough now to where we can just pass her off for a couple of hours. So my grandma just agreed.
Your grandma?
My ma.
Her baby's grandma.
Her grandma. Mama. She agreed to just watch her for a couple of hours so that we could go and see Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Now, before we get to that, just a little side note on that. I've had like several people like comment on like both my dad and his girlfriend, as well as like your mom's neighbors. We're like, oh, they're comfortable with leaving her alone so soon?
Yeah, that was a weird one.
And I'm like, I mean, she's
they're
4.5
really?
months old. And
Really?
I'm like, either they're weird or we're weird.
I know,
but
a 4-month-old? You're really gonna just hand off a 4-month-old and
for 4 hours to
go
her
see a movie?
grandmother? And I was just like, maybe these people are weird, or maybe just handing your child off to a bunch of surgeons to cut her heart open puts some things into perspective. But I was like, yeah, sure. She's with her grandma. She has food. Grandma raised babies.
That was our thing, right? Where we were like, you put the what do you say? You put the nail on the head. No. You
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
You're putting the head on the nail?
No. You hit the nail on the head?
You hit the nail on the head?
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head? Which is weird. In Swedish, you say like, där satte du huvudet på spiken. So like you put the head on the nail.
Okay, but that's actually weird because no one puts the head on the nail.
What if it's the head of the hammer? If that's what it means. You put the head of the hammer on the nail. Där satte du huvudet på spiken, right?
Now we're getting really far away from what you were trying to say.
Folks, what version of this saying exists in your language? You hit the nail on the head, or do you hit the head on the nail? Which one is it? No, but yeah. We had a previous thing of handing off the baby to someone else when she was 3 months old, and that was literally handing her off to the heart surgeons to cut her open. And that does really put stuff into perspective, whereas like other things seem quite minor in comparison.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just like a first kid versus second kid thing as well, because like I would imagine that like you're extra nervous normally when you have your first kid, and you're just so afraid of them breaking if you do anything wrong. And I think by the second or third kid, then you're just like, just let her run around and hit her head into things. She'll probably be fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we're somewhere half in between. But it's just, I think it's also a personality thing, right? I see a lot of like women on the internet go like, I don't want everyone wants to hold my baby, but I don't want anyone to hold my baby. And I'm like, oh, by all means, take the child.
You think that's because we're like old fucks who waited way too long to have kids? So now we're like more calm and comfortable than we would have been if we were like 20 when we had our first kid?
I mean, 20 maybe, but I'm gonna say like a lot of these women are also in their 30s and whatever, and I think it's just a personality thing.
Might be, but I remember that when we were like just before she was even born, when we were like in these, pre-delivery meetings with other pregnant women, and
but they were our age, a lot of them.
Yeah, so. But you could also see that the younger ones, right? Yeah. You had these like, I don't know, 18-year-old pregnant woman who just had notebook after notebook of just writing down and planning for her delivery and just trying to take into account everything that could possibly go wrong and stuff.
But I personally don't think it's an age thing. I do think it's a personality thing, because I read a lot of these internet Reddit posts about this, right? And it's like there's chill 18-year-olds and there's nervous 18-year-olds, and there's chill 20 to 30 to 40-year-olds, and there's completely nervous 20 to 30 to 40-year-olds. And in fact, like, it's not that uncommon for like older parents actually that waited so long that are like, oh my god, I have to do it right. So it's like I went through, you know, all of this, or okay, let's rephrase this. They went often through things like IVF and all of that, and are then very hyper nervous about the baby. So it's really just like where you are in life and who you are as a person that determines that. And it's like, no one there I think is right or wrong. Don't get me wrong, right? It's not wrong to be nervous about your child. It's just that's not us.
I think I was more neurotic as a person when I was younger as well. I don't know. I'm probably more chill today than I have been in other parts of my life.
I mean, I'm plenty neurotic about things, just not anxious.
Yeah, okay, fine. That's fine. Sure. But anyway, we got to go to the movies. And we got to see Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Which we liked.
We won't spoil anything about the movie.
We're not actually going to talk about it at all.
Well, no, not this movie. But like, I mean, I guess the only thing you can say is like, if you liked Into the Spider-Verse, you're probably going to like this movie as well.
Yeah.
That's that's about it. So yeah, that was cool. And it's nice that we could like wash some stink off, because we haven't gotten to go to the movies a lot in the past couple of years, because we had the pandemic, and then you didn't go to movie theaters during all of the lockdowns and stuff. And as things have opened up, we haven't really had the I don't know, there hasn't been that much that has come out that we've wanted to see in the movies anyway.
That's because there's too much superhero stuff, which makes the fact that we went for a superhero movie and liked it.
But this is different.
This is different to me.
This is like equal parts art movie and equal parts superhero movie.
Yeah, but I've always liked Spider-Man better than the other superheroes as well, so that helps.
Even among the MCU movies. Yeah, and it's like Spider-Man has always had like a special place in my heart as well. Because I grew up reading Spider-Man comics. And, but wait. I had a point I was going to make.
I'm sorry.
I had a point I was going to make.
Mm-hmm.
That was that if you look at what we went to see in the movies, like before the pandemic and stuff, I think like the last movie that we got to see in the cinemas before the lockdown started was Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Blech.
Yeah. And that was our previous latest theater experience. So it's nice to like have
that long.
That was right before the pandemic hit.
Ugh.
Yeah, so that movie actually came, oh my god, yeah, the time that has just disappeared, right? That movie came out in 2020, I think, like January or whatever. It's like 3.5 years ago.
All right.
Yeah, those years are just gone. So we have 3 years worth of memes about how bad that movie is. It's impressive how much that movie actually managed to make people change their minds about The Last Jedi. Because when The Last Jedi came out, it was considered like a trash fire and the worst Star Wars movie ever made. And The Last Jedi was considered the worst Star Wars movie ever made until Rise of Skywalker came out. And then Rise of Skywalker was so bad that people started to think The Last Jedi was good in comparison.
Now
people have tricked themselves into thinking that The Last Jedi is actually a good movie, which it absolutely is not.
One could theoretically argue, if it weren't for one thing, one could argue that the Last Jedi being so bad set Rise of Skywalker up for failure.
Oh, yeah.
However,
I would I would argue that actually, because
if they didn't just ignore most of what happened in The Last Jedi.
Well, yeah, but it was harder than that, because I would argue that because Rian Johnson was tasked with writing part 2 of a trilogy, and he did not do that. He was not interested in writing part 2 of a trilogy. So instead he just told his own story, and he ended it in a way where it's like almost impossible to continue.
I know, but it's
but he did have to spend, like, Rian Johnson, like, J.J. Abrams fucked himself, okay? He shit the bed with Rise of Skywalker. It is terrible. It's garbage. but he did have to spend the first half of the movie creating an entire new premise and an entire new conflict that he then had to resolve in the second half of the movie, which is fucking impossible. You were supposed to use the first 2 movies to build up the conflict that is getting its resolution in the third movie.
Yes, but out of all the things he could have chosen to build, this one was fucking stupid.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, oh my god, no one wanted this. Anyway, I don't even want to get into Star Wars. Like, I genuinely do not want to talk. I'm so sick of talking about Star Wars. And
it's funny, though, because the topic we talked about, chatting about, was just like a formative media in your childhood, which I assume Star Wars actually is for a lot of people.
Oh, I mean, it's for us, too.
Yeah,
in a sense, like
I was brought up in between, right? Because I watched the original trilogy when I was a kid, but like obviously I wasn't a kid when they came out.
No, but it was still big for my childhood. I watched it a lot.
Oh yeah, me too. And
so
and when the prequels came out, I'm gonna say that I was too old by that point for them to be sort of like formative for me. I can imagine that there are kids out there for whom like the prequels were actually like their first experience with Star Wars.
I mean, for me it wasn't, but I have to look up how old I was because I do remember being at least a teenager when, what was the Phantom Menace?
The Phantom Menace was the first of the prequels.
I think that was like 2001 or something, right?
It was in the 2000s, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
1999.
No way.
We were teenagers.
No
it wasn't
way.
our first Star Wars experience, but we were teenagers, so it was when we were kids, basically. But no, I wouldn't say it shaped my childhood, to be honest.
No.
So that's why we can totally abandon Star Wars now.
We're not
because
going to talk about Star Wars.
I do not want to talk about Star Wars.
Star Wars isn't actually that deep. Sorry, people, it's not. It's cool, sort of like sci-fi, whatever. But it's like, if you dig beneath the surface, you're gonna find that there isn't as much there as you think there is.
Yeah, but it's not just that I'm sick of Star Wars. I'm sick of talking about Star Wars or reading about Star Wars. I'm just genuinely miss me with that.
Yeah, well, that's just because that's about how Hollywood works now. You want to turn everything into a franchise, so you can create 10,000 different kinds of medias for it, so that people can form their entire identities around being fans of that thing. Yeah. That is a new cultural phenomenon. We didn't used to be sort of like that all-encompassing as it is today. With, for example, Marvel fans, who absolutely just define themselves as Marvel fans. We used to have Potterheads.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Imagine that.
Maybe someone in this household used to be a Potterhead.
Yes. Well, I never called myself.
You wrote Harry Potter fan fiction.
Can I talk about this myself, please? So, number one, I would have never referred to myself as a Potterhead. I think that's a very stupid way of saying it. I was just like a fan of Harry Potter.
Who wrote fan fiction?
Of course I did. I was a teenager. Of course I wrote Harry Potter fan fiction. No, but yeah, I grew up on reading Harry Potter, and it's just, I've been discussing this. Maybe we said it on another podcast, so I'm sorry for repeating myself, but it's just one of those. Yeah, I think we talked about it with Zeno. So Harry Potter, I actually started reading it before it was cool in Austria. And of course I got bullied for it a lot.
Oh.
And that was even without the fan fiction. That was just for reading Harry Potter.
Yeah, because we still lived in the era where nerds were bullied for having nerd interests.
Yeah. And I bet everyone that bullied me for this has since either read the books or seen the movies. But I was super into it. When Goblet of Fire came out, I think I must have been like 14, 15. I remember that summer, and my dad was in the US. And he actually brought, I want to say, 2 or 3 copies of it with him because, of course, the book came out much later in German. So he actually managed to get his hand on a couple copies for various people in the family. So it wasn't 3 copies for me. It was just one of them was for me. And I had to share with my cousin, and we were just reading it in shifts. Like, we had like allotted time of the day because we were hanging out at my cousin's house where each of us, and we would fight when it was handover time. That technically, because there was like food time in between, that you should get more time. So yeah, Harry Potter, very, very big.
Which is complicated now because like, back in this was like maybe 2 years ago or something. We had Zeno Gellion on the podcast a while ago, and I've done some stuff on his channel as well, and joined in his podcast. And we had a podcast about an anime podcast. We were talking about the subject of death of the author, and how it can be sort of like you have this thing that was formative for you, and it's like a big part of your childhood, and like it's shaped a lot of what you enjoy moving forward, and like your interests as an adult, and then it turns out that the author was like a Nazi or something. And then it's like, how do I feel about this piece of media now? Can I like divorce it from the author? Can I still sort of like enjoy it? Or is it sort of tainted? Are my memories of it tainted? For me, we were talking about Kenshin, Rurouni Kenshin, the anime. And how the author of that anime was caught with a bunch of child porn on his computer,
and he never had to serve any sentence.
No, he got a slap on the wrist and a ridiculous, laughably small fine for it. And then he was just welcomed back into the anime community with open arms, because he is a legend, or like the manga community.
Okay, but that also has a child porn problem in general.
Yeah, Japan has some issues when it comes to some cultural
things or whatever they're called.
And now they're making a new... Because that's the issue with Harry Potter as well, right? New stuff is still coming out. Now they're making a new version of the Kenshin anime, and I'm so split on this because I love Kenshin. Kenshin is super formative for me. It was like it was sparked my love for anime. And what made me like go down that path of just enjoying Japanese media. It all started with Kenshin, and I adore everything about it. I could talk about Kenshin for hours, but I kind of don't want to, because then people are gonna get into Kenshin, and then Mr. Child Porn is gonna get money, and I don't know how to feel about that. It's one thing if it's like, I don't know, H.P. Lovecraft or something, where the author is like dead and buried, and then, you know, you can take their media for what it was or put it in an era or whatever. But when the author is like still alive and still involved in this media and still profiting from it, then it becomes even harder to sort of like both recommend it and just enjoying it.
That's what I was gonna say. For me, it's actually very, very easy. It's not hard at all with the Harry Potter, right? It's like J.K. Rowling has opinions that get trans kids bullied, hurt, or even killed. And she's promoting these views and organizations that promote that at the end of the day. And so fuck her.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to consume anything that's going to result in her getting money again. Now, granted, she's not getting money from fan fiction, but I am 37 years old now. I'm not going to go around reading or writing Harry Potter fan fiction anymore. So that chapter of my life is closed.
So it's like new stuff that's coming out, like Hogwarts Legacy, which for all intents and purposes, everyone is saying is like a really good video game. And she wasn't actively involved with creating it, but she is still, you know, getting those residuals. She is getting money for people buying that.
So I'm not gonna play it. And it's like this is actually easy for me, I have to admit, because I'm just like I'm not a particularly, I don't know, like I'm not a person that just sees a thing and then has to play it or whatever, right? I have restraint when it comes to these things. So I'm just like, okay, fuck that, I'm not playing it, right?
Yeah.
But
does it color like your enjoyment of it? Is it like, is it just a principled thing of like, I'm just not gonna touch this media again?
Yeah.
Or is it also a case of like, oh, because of this, I actually like Harry Potter less than I used to as a concept?
Maybe. I mean, now looking back on it, you can look at some of the things she's written and scratch your head about it, because the whole thing with the goblins just kind of being like a terrible allegory for Jews
and they enjoy being slaves. They want to be slaves.
Exactly. So there's a couple of things in there that now as an adult I'm like, ugh.
oh, what do you mean the only black character has an absentee father? Huh, how about that?
Yeah, so so it's not like I particularly feel like reading it again anyway at this point. So it's just very easy for me to stay away from Harry Potter and be like, yeah, fuck J.K. Rowling. The thing about death of the author for me is like that's perfectly fine so long as the author is like actually dead. Kind of what you were saying, right? And so long as they're alive,
then it's easy to
yeah. So that's the line for me, right? I'm like, yeah, I'll take your argument of death of the author and just enjoying the media without the author. It's like, yeah, so long as they're dead and their estate isn't like still funding things like that.
I mean,
it gets a bit more complicated because then you'd have to look into what their estate is actually doing.
It can be complicated even if they're dead. For example, Michael Jackson is like another thing where a lot of people have issues with that. Now, obviously, I am one of those people, and so is Mike, by the way, who is of the opinion that the allegations against Michael Jackson are largely unfounded, and we kind of just don't actually think he did it. but a lot of people out there still do think he did it. And then it's like, oh, can you listen to his music? Yeah. If you believe that he did all of these things that he's been accused of doing. And that's a tricky one, even though he is dead. Right?
And that's what I was saying. I can. And I draw the line there. Like, if I'm gonna go, and then it gets even more complicated when you were like, oh, it was acceptable at the time, right? If you go into things historically, right? I mean, like Beethoven and Mozart, all of these artists from way back when, or just writers from way back when, the further back you go, if you compare things with like modern values and morals, it was awful. Everything they did. So where's the line? Like, how far back is it acceptable? Like,
that's what Suki said, the guy who made Kenshin, when they found the stuff on his computer. He said that, like, oh, that's old. That's been on my computer for like 20 years. And back when I got these things, the legal age for sex in Japan was lower. So these images weren't actually illegal when I got them.
Yeah, but I'm not debating legality. I'm debating morality. Right,
yes.
Which is a different thing.
Yes.
And legal and moral are often very, very different things. And so it's like, I think I've said this before, how I feel about Wagner, right? Richard Wagner's music, he wasn't a Nazi because Nazis weren't around when he was alive, right? But he probably would have been. Yeah.
If they had been around, he would have been a card-carrying member of the Nazi party.
He was very much
likely
into a concept of, which nowadays you'd call Deutschtümelei, Germanism, kind of like, if you want to call it that, which is like, you know, like making all of this stuff about like German sagas and whatnot, like promoting that. And he was just very popular with the Nazis. I don't even know if he would have been a Nazi. He could have been like, he let's put it like this, maybe he would have been a Nazi. I wouldn't say 100%, but they sure loved his music. And if you go look at it nowadays, right, there's like, it's like still sort of popular with a particular subset of people, but also it's just good music. I mean, his operas are way too long, but there's some stuff in there that really, really slaps. So it's just like, you don't want to be associated with the people associated with it, kind of like it can get complicated. So I try to draw the line for the most part at either the author is dead, or is there an association with their work?
Yeah.
That I just don't want associated with me.
That's why I'm kind of like just... and I think this is not just me. This is a lot of people. Douglas Adams, the creator of Dilbert.
Douglas Adams is not the creator of
Douglas
Dilbert.
Adams.
Do not besmirch the memory of Douglas Adams.
Wrong Adams. Scott Adams.
Okay.
Sorry, wrong Adams. Okay, no, Douglas Adams is a treasure.
Yes.
And yes, and we love him and everything about him, and Douglas Adams is great. I'm sorry for spitting on the name of Douglas Adams. No.
Who is dead, by the way. Even if you didn't like him, in my book, you know,
yeah.
that means anything he did, I would still read his books, but no.
No, I was talking about Scott Adams, the maker of Dilbert.
Oh yeah.
So, because he went full crazy MAGA, right?
Yeah.
And the thing about Dilbert is that if you are part of my generation, not your generation, if you're part of our generation, and you grew up like being a part of nerd culture from like our era, then you read Dilbert and you enjoyed Dilbert. Dilbert was one of the like the funniest and sort of like most clever cartoons satirizing office culture, and like it had a lot of good, funny and true things to say about like the meaninglessness of and sort of like just the stupidity of office culture.
Yeah. But actually, the longer it went on, also the more boomer humor it got.
It might have gotten a bit boomery. I might have stopped reading before it got boomery. But, and this is an issue because sometimes when you have these things that come out about authors, and everyone's like just turning on the media, it's very popular to like just adopt this almost historical revisionism about it, where you're like, oh, this X media was never good. This was never actually good. People go back and be much more critical about that media when you view it in the lens of what we know about the author. I'm sure there are people who are like that for like Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling and stuff, and you go back and you read some stuff about it and you're like, Harry Potter was never good. Star Wars, if we're gonna go back to that, like just how Star Wars media that's been bad and come out recently have sort of made people go back and reevaluate previous stuff as well, and you're like, oh, the actual original trilogy isn't actually all that deep. It's
not deep, it's just fun.
Yeah, but it is fun. But the thing about Dilbert is that like you can't do that because Dilbert was actually good. When we grew up, Dilbert was genuinely good and it was genuinely funny, and you sort of have to accept that as like, no, if I were to go back and read Dilbert strips from when I was like a kid, I would probably still find them funny because it was funny. It was like good and it was smart and it was witty and it had interesting things to say. And then the author just turned out, I don't know if he was always like this or if he changed into this, sort of like what happened to Russell Brand or whatever. But
what happened to Russell Brand?
Oh, he went super crazy.
He did?
Yeah. He started like a YouTube channel and went off the deep end, and he used to just be sort of like this, oh, he's a bit woo and anti-establishment, and he wears loose-fitting clothes, and he goes on talk shows and talks about the hypocrisy of Hollywood and of whatever. And then in the wake of COVID, when he started like being a big thing on his own YouTube channel, he went anti-vax and he went sort of like just, oh, big pharma is actually trying to kill us all, and I think he's going. I'm not sure if he's right wing. I'm not sure if that's where he's at nowadays. I don't know. I do know he went full anti-vax.
Well, anti-vax is one of those horseshoe kind of like opinions where the extreme left and the extreme right sort of converge, at least as far as like Europeans are concerned, our super lefties who are into all of the alternative medicine and blah blah homeopathy bullshit. So can be either.
So the left are anti-vax because they're into alternative medicine, and that's why they don't trust big pharma. And the right are anti-vax because they think big pharma is in league with the globalists who are running the world from behind the Okay, we're not gonna. That's not what this.
We're super veering.
Oh
okay, that Russell Brand. Okay, but the Dilbert guy.
The Dilbert guy, Scott Adams. That's also like an issue of like I don't. Fortunately, like you said, that like Dilbert has become more sort of like boomer humor. It's easier to dismiss it now because the media itself just isn't good any longer. It's just Dilbert is no longer culturally relevant, and it hasn't been for a long time. So you can just dismiss it now, and it's fine.
Fortunately, the Calvin and Hobbes guy just, what's his name?
Bill Watterson?
Yeah, he just mostly doesn't tweet or things like that. So.
Oh, no, he's a super private person, and he's also been, like, very sort of, like, anti-commercializing his stuff. That's why you don't see Calvin and Hobbes on T-shirts or lunch boxes or whatever, because he's refused.
Yeah.
He's refused to have like Calvin slapped on merchandise.
So we love you, Bill Watterson. We know nothing about you, and that's what we love most about you.
Yeah, and he sort of like didn't insert himself into things either, and he's just kept to himself. But Bill Watterson is fantastic, and Calvin and Hobbes is 100% among that formative media. I read a lot of comic books growing up, and like my favorites and the ones that like made the biggest impression for me were kind of like Dilbert, Calvin and Hobbes, Donald Duck, and Spider-Man. I'm gonna say those were like the big four for me. Did you read comics growing up?
We had like Donald Duck, what do you call those in German? They're called lustiges Taschenbuch, the funny pocketbook.
Sure.
Disney, it's not just Donald Duck, right?
Yeah, Disney pocketbook that says a collection of Disney whatever.
Yeah, exactly, those. We had those. I occasionally read those. I have to say, like, I was an extremely avid reader as a child. I mean, sort of still am. Not so much recently, but I go through phases where I read like 100 books a year and then a bit less, so blah, 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 up and down. But I wasn't much of a comic reader. I just, those I occasionally read. It was the only thing my brother would read, actually. So we had a lot of those at home because my parents were just desperate for my brother to read something, anything. So that was the Disney stuff. But I think it's just... my parents, I never, it wasn't until I was old enough to go, on the internet and figure nerdy things out on my own. But I don't think my parents were ever interested in comics or didn't get that. So they didn't get it for us either. The exception being the Donald Duck stuff.
For me, it actually started with... it was something that my grandparents on my father's side probably started in me because that was their Christmas gift to me. That was a yearly thing. They got me a yearly subscription to Donald Duck comics. And I just got that same Christmas gift from them every year. I got another year of subscription to Donald Duck comic books. So I got them delivered by mail to my door.
No, I remember being brought up mostly being taught, I guess. I don't know if it's necessarily just my parents, but also like teachers or just people around me of like books with pictures in them is for little kids.
Oh, that's sad.
It's not an opinion I hold as an adult, so don't worry, guys.
Because like you can go back now and read Calvin and Hobbes, and it's like it's great.
Yeah,
like as an adult, you can enjoy it.
Our daughter for sure is gonna read that.
Calvin and Hobbes is a fantastic comic because it doesn't treat its reader as like a kid. It doesn't treat its reader as like dumb or can't understand complex things. It's actually quite intelligent, and it assumes that kids can understand intelligent comedy as well. And again, it's like just has a lot of interesting things to say about the world and like makes you think. I like things that makes you think.
Yeah.
And but for me it was like Donald Duck was where it started and where it's like my love of comic books started. And like the Don Rosa series about like the life of Scrooge McDuck is like it's so good. You can go back and read like the art is amazing and it's just the stories are fantastic and you just see Scrooge traveling all over the world and how he built his fortune up from nothing and it's just completely like recontextualizes that character and makes him more interesting as well. But I'm very happy looking back on like what sort of my child role models were in that case.
Scrooge McDuck.
Not Scrooge.
No,
Donald.
I'm just joking.
Yeah. Not Scrooge. But Donald Duck, Spider-Man, and Calvin. Oh. I'm going to say were like probably my 3 biggest role models as a kid. And Calvin is good because he made me like a little fucking wise guy, right? Mm. Which you should be. If you're a kid, you should be a little fucking wise guy. That's it. It's good. You're going to need that throughout your entire life.
I feel like you mean like a smartass. A wise guy is something else.
Yeah, but Calvin is a smartass, but he's also a wise guy. And a menace. But then, besides him, Donald Duck is I'm gonna say he's a fantastic role model.
Yeah, aren't wise guys mafia?
That is what. Yeah, but that's one. It's slang for mafia, but it's not just mafia. But
sorry, I just had to look that up because I only have negative connotations to the term wise guy.
Wise guys it's mafia, but it can also be sort of like the same thing as a smartass.
Oh, okay. I'd never heard it like that, really? So I was like, Calvin, a wise guy. Sorry for that aside, but.
Donald Duck is a fantastic role model for kids, and I'm going to explain why, okay? He is the everyman. He is the everyman, and nothing is ever easy for him. He has his cousin who's like extremely lucky. I don't know what that character is called in English.
Me neither. It's Gustav Ganz in German.
All right. And he just breezes through life. He gets everything without even trying, right? And it's such a fantastic contrast. You have Scrooge, who, granted, he built his fortune himself, even though, the whole thing about the self-made multi-billionaire is a concept that we might not believe in as much today as we used to. But Scrooge is still, like, at its core, like a sympathetic character. But then you have Donald, who... in every new comic book, he has a new job. He's never has the same job, but like because he always like does odd jobs for Scrooge. But the idea is that like he fails at stuff, he gets fired, but then he finds a new job. He never gives up. He never quits. He's always a hard worker, and he's always trying to do the right thing. And it's so apparent when it comes to the 3 nephews who live with him and who he supports. So it's like he's a single guy who's supporting 3 kids, and they're not even his kids.
No, he has like a fuck-up sister, I guess.
He has a fuck-up sister who abandoned her kids, and he took them in instead. They're not his sons, they're his nephews.
And it's canonical that he went to World War II. He's in the Navy. Disney says it's canon that he went to World War II. So
yeah, well, he's done everything. But that was like in that era, and they made like propaganda movies to support the troops or whatever.
Oh yeah, he's a sailor in the Navy. That's why he has the sailor outfit.
That is why he has the sailor outfit. And kept it even since. And it's like I always liked Donald more than other Disney characters because like Mickey Mouse,
it's just boring.
Because he's smart and he's capable and he succeeds at everything. Scrooge, he's smart, he's capable, he succeeds at everything. But Donald is a failure. But no, he's not a failure. He's not a failure. But it doesn't come easy for him. He's not a natural talent. He's not naturally talented at anything. He is just a hard worker, and he never gives up, and he always does what's right. And it's such a fantastic role model for kids, and it's just like this is what you want to teach your kids. It's like he is a loving role model for these kids.
Who has a bit of anger management issues.
Yeah, he does have some anger management issues, but that's fine. He's had a lot of setbacks to work with. Yeah, and he's always, on the side of good and just part of the community, and he just tries to do what's right against all odds. And that's nice. And Stan Lee is dead now, and I guess we're all happy that like no scandals ever came out about him that forces us to recontextualize his works.
But he's dead now, so as far as I'm concerned, even if they came out, I don't feel like doing that.
But it's the same thing with Spider-Man. Spider-Man is Marvel's Donald Duck. Okay? He is not Tony Stark, multi-billionaire. He is not Thor, who is a literal god. He is not Captain America, who is the role model for an entire nation. He's not Superman, like the perfect being, like a messianic Jesus-like figure who has no flaws and represents the best in all of us. He is a guy with a shitty paying job who lives with his grandma out in Queens. He is his aunt, Aunt May. And his
depending on which Spider-Man we're talking about, I guess.
And he had a rough upbringing, and his parents died. And he got his superpowers, and immediately he started acting irresponsibly with them, and just, started doing like wrestling and stuff, and prize fighting, and didn't care about catching criminals and stuff. And he had a robber who just let him run away. He could have stopped him, but he was just like, this isn't my problem. I don't give a shit. And then that same robber then went and killed his Uncle Ben. And it just, like, it didn't even know him. Didn't even know who he was. But it was just, Uncle Ben was just...
He got mugged, I think?
Yeah, it just got at the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's when he learned that with great power comes great responsibility. And... Superman also talks about that. Superman also talks about how the strong have an obligation to protect the weak. Not that Americans care about this. Woo! But they're all like, oh yeah, we should look up to Superman. Superman represents the best of America, except we're not going to follow any of his teachings.
No, same about Jesus.
It's kind of like with Jesus. But but Peter Parker is, again, he is the everyman, and things don't always turn out great for him. He has a lot of setbacks. He has a lot of things that like just go wrong for him. And he still is always going to be good. He's always going to try to do the right thing. And he always believes in his code and his morality. And he believes in the good in the world. He refuses to kill his enemies because that's not what he's about. And it's like, this is fantastic. This is a fantastic role model. All kids should grow up reading Spider-Man because it's just, that's what we want from that character. I read a thing that Stan Lee said also. Why, unlike Superman, who you can see is, Clark Kent, or like, you can see his face, right? And with Batman, you can see half his face. You can see the lower part of his face. You can see it's like a white dude. and Stan Lee said that like he intentionally made Spider-Man's costume a full body suit where you can't see anything of what's underneath, because he wanted everyone from like all creeds and all races and whatever. He wanted everyone to be able to identify with Spider-Man and be able to pretend that they're Spider-Man. And you wanted the kid to be able to buy a Spider-Man costume and wear a Spider-Man costume for Halloween and stuff. And it's like, I can also be Spider-Man. And like, I love that. That's so good. Oh, that's so good. I love Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man is good.
Spider-Man is good.
You
weren't that into Spider-Man before you met me. Or like you didn't have a lot of experience with Spider-Man before you met me, right? That's because
I didn't grow up reading comics. I didn't have a lot of experience with anything. But that's kind of like what we talked about with your mom yesterday, right? Because she was like, "Oh, would you recommend the Spider-Man movie to me?" Well, across the Spider-Verse, it is, right?
First of all, no, because it's part 2 of a trilogy and you haven't seen part 1.
But you were like, well, it's like a love letter for people who grew up reading Spider-Man or who've read a lot of Spider-Man. And I had to say, or like me, are married to a man who talks about Spider-Man all the time. So I know a lot about Spider-Man in the comics without ever having read a single one of them. So I know about like all kinds of different Spider-Mans and Spider-Men, like Miles Morales and some of these others, the Ghost Spider.
Spider-Man 2099.
Exactly. I knew about them before Into the Spider-Verse, just because you talk a lot about Spider-Man. So I have secondhand read Spider-Man without ever having read a single.
Secondhand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you said second head.
I meant secondhand.
Here we
sorry.
go. But like I have to stop myself because I can just rave about Spider-Man for hours. You can just put me in front of a microphone and be like, just speak about Spider-Man for 20 hours, and I can do that.
You've been doing that. I've been sitting here and wondering how I can get a word in edgewise and how we can prevent this particular thing from happening. And I kind of saw my opportunity there.
Nice. I can actually throw out a plug here because we did play Spider-Man PS4 on this channel. It's a bit of an older Let's Play. You have to go back. We didn't really have the sort of like same microphone quality as we do now, so there is that thing. If you can accept the fact that the microphone quality is so.
But you do talk a lot about Spider-Man.
Well, obviously, I'm gonna say that like that. And that LP was sort of like how I introduced you to Spider-Man, like through that a lot, to a large part.
To some things.
You didn't know about Miles Morales, for example, before that LP.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, that playthrough is basically just my love letter to Spider-Man. That is me talking about Spider-Man for 60 episodes in a row, and it just doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. I can keep on talking about Spider-Man forever. So if that's something you're into, if that sounds fun to you, just listening to me talk about Spider-Man forever and ever, then go back to our archives and give some of our older stuff a listen. It's good stuff. It's good material. It's good LP.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to figure out like childhood role models for me, but I honestly can't really think of a whole lot. I mean, there's a lot of childhood books that I could actually talk about that are just German.
What about The Little Prince?
But I love The Little Prince. But then you could go and say, like, is it really a kid's book, or is it just a book that people read to kids because the main character is a kid?
Yeah, but it's like, is it formative media? Did it sort of shape your interest? Because like, you know, I've been drawing Poland Ball comics as an adult. That's how we met each other, right? And people commented on that with like layout and drawing style that some people draw Poland Ball comics to look more like traditional comic strips, and people have always commented that I draw them as if they were superhero comics. If you look at like how you set up panels and how you tell like a visual story, and mine always had that feel, and I think that probably is because of my just inspiration from Spider-Man comics more than anything else. So I'm gonna say that like Spider-Man is absolutely a formative media for me, just shaping a lot of my interest. I'm gonna say Calvin and Hobbes sparked a lot of critical thinking in me and sparked the thirst for more sort of like intelligent media and more sort of like biting satire that I kind of like, okay, I want the more complex stuff. I don't really want the easily digested things. I kind of enjoy this more.
I think I was thinking about it. I could think of two examples, right? One is from my younger childhood years, which would be the books written by Michel Ende. Americans would, I will explain. So Americans would pronounce that Michael Ende, I guess. He was a German.
Michael Ende.
Just E-N-D-E. And he was a German author who wrote a lot of children's books that I loved and that I will definitely read with our child. One that I think everyone has heard about, at least our age, is he wrote The Never-Ending Story.
Oh.
My absolute favorite book of his that he wrote is Momo. And then I don't want to get into the specifics, right? Because these are books that probably no one has heard of before. Yeah. But I can definitely recommend them. His books, they're also like, they're smart. They have serious themes, you know. He was
The Never-Ending Story is it's so meta as well because of the whole book within a book within a book thing.
Yeah.
And that's like a piece of media that's been copied by like everyone.
And he had all of his books are so they have like really serious themes, but they're still kids' books. So it's again the thing of like not assuming children can't, deal with.
Is that a Germanism? Because I'm thinking about like the Brothers Grimm as well, but that's more
that's
more
older.
dark themes rather than serious themes.
Yeah, those are just older. That's just scaring people into behaving. Which I think is a very universal thing, because that's even something that tribes in the Amazon do. It's like having like kind of like dark themed like folklore things to scare people. But
growing up here in Sweden, we referred to that more as a German thing rather than a global thing. We talked about the Brothers Grimm as being like very sort of indicative of German culture.
But that's just because they wrote it down and it was exported. But you can find this all across the world. Like that's a thing that even like that's what I meant, like the Amazon tribes, everyone apparently brought up their children with scary stories. The French did it with Beauty and the Beast is a French story. Little Mermaid is Danish. All of them aren't that happy and are kind of dark, right? It's just modern day retellings aren't.
Beauty and the Beast is absolutely about conforming to society, and you've talked about this before.
Yeah,
how it was about
just deal with it. You're going to be married to an awful man, but you're going to learn how to
forcing
live with
women to accept arranged marriages.
Exactly. Ooh. And so that's only viewed as German because the Germans really just collected a lot of that. Like the Brothers Grimm didn't come up with these stories. They collected them and wrote them down. As far as I know. No, I don't know if it's a German thing, but with Michael Ende, he wrote these, I think, in the 70s, a lot in the 60s and 70s. I just think, as far as I can recall, Michael Ende was alive and sort of a young adult, something, during Nazi Germany. And he was a socialist. So probably didn't have the greatest time of it, and it probably shaped his views, and he saw Nazi indoctrination in children, and I think a part of it is that the book burnings and all of that, where it's just he wanted to write books for children, teaching children good values instead of bad values. So they have serious themes underlying all of this, but in ways that children can enjoy, understand, and it teaches you, acceptance. It teaches you that people are different. It teaches you better things.
Was it the sort of thing where like you had to sort of sneak this in sort of under the surface to get it past like the publishers and censorship and things?
He didn't write those during Nazi Germany. He wrote those later. Those are post-war books. Post-war books, post the horrors of the war books. But just, I think that must have shaped that for a while. So that's Michael Ende. The other thing that we can both talk about, because I think you forgot that this is probably also an important thing from your youth, but absolutely 100% Terry Pratchett.
I think yes and no, and I'm going to say because there is a bit of an age difference between you and me. I'm a couple of years older, and while I do love Terry Pratchett, it's still it didn't spark my love for like fantasy literature because that was Tolkien. And I should probably mention Tolkien as well, that I read Lord of the Rings at a very young age.
Same. I was like 12 when I started. But it took me 2 years to finish because I got scared and had to stop.
I think I was even younger. I just seen the books in the bookshelf. We had them at home. And at some day when I think I was just 10 years old or something, just at random, I just picked the book out of the bookshelf and started reading it. Just completely unprompted. I just did that by myself because I was like, I want to know what this is. And I got like super sucked in and hey, how could I have forgotten about that? That is one of the biggest things. Yeah. Reading Tolkien and reading Lord of the Rings as a 10-year-old. That absolutely like just set me down the nerd path.
Yeah, Terry Pratchett didn't send me down the nerd path, but he did. He was funny. but serious at the same time. You know, so it was more like that, and he took like a lot of serious themes and made them and wrapped them in humor.
It's English humor, right?
Yeah, but the thing about Terry Pratchett for me, and maybe that's why I didn't even realize it at the time, but the older I got, the more I appreciated it, and I could go on about this one for hours, is that Terry Pratchett writes good women. He writes women who are people. Not objects or something, right?
Yeah.
He has, and that's why I always loved the characters of the witches, for example. Because it's how often do you get to read books where the main characters are just ugly old women?
Not like your young adult novels where you have like this.
Yeah.
I'm not like other girls. I'm just naturally beautiful and talented at everything.
There's not a whole lot of that in Terry Pratchett, and when there is, it's usually satirized. But Terry Pratchett gave me so many cool female characters.
Right.
Susan. The witches. What's her name? I love the City Watch, actually. So the one that marries Captain Carrot, the werewolf. God.
Agua?
Yeah.
Angua. There we go.
Like a lot of that, or just Sybil, Captain Vimes's later wife.
Yes.
Like, it's just a lot of women that aren't like your typical book character, but are kind of your typical woman. You know, and it's like of all kind of like walks of life and ages, and I just really appreciate that about that. And I think I don't think I realized it at the time why they had such appeal to me, these books and these characters.
Is it the contrast of all other media?
Yes. But as an adult, I do realize now why I was so drawn to all of that. And I just really adore these books, adored them. There's like an entire wall of Terry Pratchett in our apartment of our combined books. But for me, yes, they are super formative books of my teenage years.
Hey, Star Wars did good there. Princess Leia is a good female character.
Yeah.
She is. Whereas like her being a woman isn't really sort of like... I mean, yeah, there are some romance stuff, because of course there is, because it was a movie made in like the late 70s, early 80s. And it's weird because they're siblings and they kiss. But even beyond all of that, it's like just her being a woman isn't really like... Because here's the thing. I don't like...
There's the slave Leia thing.
There is the slave Leia thing.
That's
But it's one thing where like people are like, oh... this is a good female character because her being a woman isn't part of her character. I disagree with this. Whereas, like, I don't think that's a good character. If like their femininity or whatever isn't a part of the character, it's the same as like people saying like, oh, this is a gay character, but them being gay isn't a part of their character. That's good writing.
No, but I'm a woman, and being a woman is part of my character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, but you can do it in a genuine way. Where it doesn't just come across as men writing women, right?
Yeah. And you are treated, like, the question is, I think for me the definition there is, and that's why I don't super agree with this due to the third movie. In the first and second movie I might agree actually, but the third one, the question isn't, are the people in universe treating you differently because you're a woman? Because they should.
Yeah.
It's, are the writers treating you differently because the character is a woman, right?
Well, that was for example Lindsay Ellis' argument about Megan Fox in the Transformers movies.
Yeah.
Whereas like just if you look at actual like sort of character motivations and like how they behave and stuff, she's one of the few characters in the movie who actually has like a real character arc and real agency. But everything about the framing of the movie and like the camera shots and also how all the other characters treat her sort of like reinforces this idea in the viewers that she is like a stupid bimbo.
Yeah.
And that was like the lasting image.
Yeah, so it's like, how do you set this up sort of for the viewer, right? But it's like, I think it's disingenuous if you have like, you're not being treated differently by people in universe for being a woman, gay, you know, but Black, Asian, minority, whatever you want, right? It's like, that's ridiculous. People do treat you differently for it.
It's a really cool thing that I remember, if we're going to veer into the pro wrestling tangent, right? I read an interview with Cody Rhodes back when he was still in AEW. Now he's back in WWE. But he is married to a black woman, Brandy Rhodes. And he talked about like them dating and like them getting married and like how she has sort of like shaped his views and made him see things in from new perspectives that I didn't consider before. And he said that like early on in the relationship, he told her that like, oh, you know, the thing about like I'm colorblind, as like I don't see color, and she rebuked that, and she just told him like, if you can't see color, then you can't ever understand my experience. And that sort of like shook him and be like, oh, okay. I thought that I was being progressive and anti-racist and whatever, but I'm actually coming at this from the wrong perspective.
Yeah. No, and it's like it kind of prevents you from empathizing with someone, and it is. But that's why it is a bit annoying that, you know, a lot of writers and writing, or just the people in charge of the decision making for video games and movies, etc., are just men, straight white men. Because they have such trouble really understanding and empathizing then with others' lived experience, that you just cannot identify with these female characters, gay characters, just any kind of non-straight white male characters, because these writers just kind of think like that, maybe, where there's like, I want to be progressive, but go about it wrong. Like, I think like all of these people for so many decades who thought that showing us and still think that showing a strong woman means that she just is like abrasive and violent. And it's like, that's not a strong woman. That's, to me, a weak woman. Because abrasiveness and violence, to me, are weaknesses and not strengths, right? So
well, that's been Marvel's big thing. And Marvel is huge on the whole men writing women thing, right? Where they're like, oh, we're gonna give the female characters the girl boss moment in the fucking Marvel Avengers Endgame movie, where they get to pose together for 5 seconds. Whoa, they get to have a girl boss moment. Now please forget about how we have been writing these women to be eye candy for like 20 movies straight. And whenever they do have strong characters, like for example Captain Marvel, which is a movie that has like issues, it does veer down that path of like, I've talked about this before, how the idea of strong woman means that she constantly has to assert her independence, and she constantly has to repeat the mantra that I don't need no man, I can do this by myself. I'm a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. And you have these scenes of men trying to help her, and she's like, haha, silly men, I don't need your help. And it's like, you're still coding it that this character still only exists in relation to men. She has no identity of herself beyond how she interacts with male characters.
And that's number one, that, right? It's like the whole Bechdel test of just women talking to each other and not discussing men. That's the thing that's missing, and that a lot of like strong women that it's all about like not getting along with other women as well. Where it's like that's ridiculous. Why would anyone want that? But I think it also just completely dismisses the actual strengths that so many women around the world have, and the things that we do. Where stereotypically, right, it's still a lot of women that carry so much of the mental load of just family life and everyday life, and that are just the support that are just juggling everything, keeping things going. You know, that is strength. That takes strength. And that's not weakness, but it's portrayed as such in a lot of media. You know, it's like a housewife, no agency, blah, 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 where it's like, well, doesn't go so well if you remove that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like they're, I don't know, we're just keeping people together, having friendships and keeping them going. That takes strength. It's not independence that makes you strong. And this idea of having to do everything alone and in spite of people and whatnot, that's easy. Like doing things only your way, or the whole my way or the highway. It's like, oh, you don't have to compromise. You don't have to work with people. You don't have to do things you don't want to do, right? That's to me.
And now we're back to why I enjoy Donald Duck as a character so much more than I do Mickey Mouse or Scrooge, because that is an example of exactly that sort of dichotomy. Where Mickey Mouse is this strong character who always does things his own way and always succeeds and is so capable or whatever. But that's just him walking around and just owning the world, and nothing can budge him, nothing can affect him. But he's not. He doesn't have a strong relation to anything else outside of being cool. Whereas Donald Duck is more grounded. But he has a family. He's a family man. And he's just raising his kids and his struggles with doing that and teaching them good values. And that is like a much more sympathetic character. It's a much more interesting character. It's a character that like has more things to say about, I don't know, life. Right? Mm-hmm. Mickey Mouse doesn't have shit to teach anyone about life. Mickey Mouse hasn't lived a day. Donald Duck has lived 1,000,000 lifetimes. Mickey Mouse hasn't seen shit.
Is that gonna be your episode title? Let's not upset Disney in the title.
There's the house of the mouse after us.
There's a couple of things that we're willing to do for being edgelords, but maybe let's not poke the mouse.
Let's not poke the mouse. Maybe we'll poke the mouse a little bit. I don't know.
I think it's enough doing it while talking about it.
We've had a couple of topics in this episode that are like, ooh.
Have we?
We've brought up Nazis. We've brought up child pornography.
Oh, yeah, we have. I suppose we have. It's just, to me, I don't know. Maybe it's just I live in my naive bubble of, I'm like, I don't see anything wrong with discussing these topics in a negative and critical manner, right?
No.
I think we should, but
it's in an educational context.
But of course, I am not the person that is like, but I want to make ad money off of this, and people get upset when you mention the Holocaust.
Yeah, people don't like hearing.
People, for some reason, don't like the Holocaust.
So let's stop talking about it. That's the takeaway, people. That's the takeaway.
Blah.
Are we done?
Yeah. I really don't know where to go from here. I've talked myself into a bit of a dead end.
Yeah, no, we're done. We were going to talk about like formative media and we covered that. We did that. We can pat ourselves on the back. All right, thanks for listening, people. We'll see you again next week for a brand new topic.
But we're probably going to come back to the Holocaust. I always do.
David Cage said that all the female characters in my games are whores.
He did?
Yeah, that's a direct quote. He's proud of that.
But they're not. He just treats them as if they are, but they're not. Oh my god!
Yeah, we're gonna have to have the David Cage episode soon, right?
Oh my god. There's so much to unpack.